Thank you very much. What I'd like to do is share with you some of the extraordinary shifts that are occurring in our world of commerce. So, what do I mean when I say capitalism? In this manner, what I simply mean is the way in which we come together in a collective effort to add value to customers, create value for ourselves, and in the case of public companies, our shareholders. Capitalism certainly does not mean the same thing in different parts of the world. So certainly you would have to say that the way you would practice Nordic or Scandinavian capitalism is different from how we practice Anglo-Saxon capitalism. And isn't it funny / interesting / ironic that the biggest capitalist economy in the world is controlled by the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party? So I wrote this book. It's called Next Generation Leadership. And so this just came out. So this is what I'm going to share with you is some of the research in this book. What matters most to you in selecting an employer? Because I think we all observe that amongst Gen Y is that they're moving from employer to employer with frightening rapidity at a rate at which we haven't seen in generations past. So you'll see in this list, there are all kinds of manners of choices that I gave them, from tangible to intangible benefits. So let me just show you what the top 3 were. Number 3 were development opportunities. Number 2, organizational culture. I want to see where I'm going to be working, and I want to meet the people who are immediately around me. Number 1 is work-life balance. So among the older generations, when they hear work-life balance, they think of that as a when statement. But when I asked Gen Y, well, what do you mean when you say work-life balance? What they said is, no, what we mean by that is a where statement. So technology allows me to work wherever I wish. So certainly the way in which we experience work is less and less to do with a workplace and more to do with what we do and with the outputs that we produce and the immediate people that we work with. So there are some immediate implications of that. First of all, the way we think about benefits certainly has to be immediate to our employees and that we're always constantly offering them development opportunities. That doesn't have to be a class, right? It could be something like this, a webinar. It can be a secondment. It can be an international placement, but it can't be something which is like a reward for tenure. Another way we can do that is create stronger mentor-mentee relationships. But that should always be informal. In other words, a mentor-mentee relationship should not be with your boss, with your manager, because that starts to blur the line between a mentor conversation and a performance conversation. You don't want that. So if you have a lot of churn, at least that is an advantage, that you have employees who have a lot of different experiences, not just a 20, 30, 40-year experience in that one organization, yours. So think about progression rather than promotion, right? Giving people development opportunities all the time rather than, you only get X piece of development when you are promoted. So that 3-stage life of kind of education, work, retirement, that is, as a concept, is falling apart. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Because if people are going to live for a long time and work for a long time, I think what they're also looking for are more opportunities for variety and development. And that implies diversity of experiences. So there's no question, our talent is less loyal, more mobile, less constrained, more willing to jump around. But there's good news too. These employees, our youngest employees, are more connected, more informed, more global than ever. So this is certainly how organizations need to evolve. This was an interesting study that was done. What thing in your life can you not live without? And I'm sure probably 99% of you got this right, that the most popular answer by far was the dreaded mobile device. Again, another downside is that over half of us in the UK suffer from a genuine psychological malady called nomophobia. It's fear of not having phone or Wi-Fi signal. Despite many of the tragic implications of the context in which we as a society find ourselves right now amidst COVID-19, I hope that one benefit is that we are remembering what it is to slow down and switch off every now and then. Because we as a society suffer from hurry sickness. And it's lovely Professor Richard Jolly, who's at Ohio State University, has identified this. This is also a really interesting time in that most of us are working from home. Before we found ourselves in this state that we're in, it was estimated that 40% of the US and European working population, for example, work from home at least part of the time. Today it's 100%, right? For all of us. But when we go back, it's not going to be back to like 40%, 50%. So one change, which is now irrevocable, is that almost all of us are going to be working from home at least part of the time. So how is leadership as a concept going to evolve? So I want to come back to Generation Y, and I gave them these 5 options. Kind of scarily, a whopping 1% said it was all about maximizing financial worth, and we can all begin sort of our, terror. And actually, I agree with them, because I think when I think back to the Great Recession, 2007 and 8, a great deal of that crisis was caused by companies losing their way, right? Focusing on quarterly analyst forecasts versus what is the value that I do and renew and create for my customers, my employees, and my communities every day. But you see this emerging trend in terms of how CEOs are talking about their business. Let's look at one of the youngest CEOs in the world, Mark Zuckerberg. Facebook wasn't originally created to be a company. It was built to accomplish a social mission, to make the world more open and connected. Basically saying, this is what we stand for, this is what we're trying to do, and if you believe in that mission and agree with that, maybe you'd consider investing. If you were an investor, early stage investor, you invested right at that IPO of Facebook, for the first 2 years, your investment would have doubled every year. Over the next 3 years, your money would have doubled again. Let's take it look more closer to home. Just in the UK, look at pension plans, which are some of the biggest investors in the world. But look at this, ethical equity fund, where the first thing they look at is company mission, sustainability, triple bottom line, and only invest in those organizations. 15% growth from 2018 to 2019. So again, I want to make the point, it is not a trade-off decision. Like, sure, well, it's great to do well for society and whatnot, but ultimately I want my pension plan to grow as quickly and as much as possible. So I'm going to look at UK equity or global equity, and I'll leave the ethical equity to the tree huggers. Not at all. These two things work in tandem with each other. So now let me turn to customers. So in other words, if Amazon comes out tomorrow with, a checking account, a current account, more young people would opt for them than your HSBC, your Lloyds. That's kind of fascinating, right? We already know Apple has already come out with a credit card, for example. The insurgents are outcompeting the incumbents in today's world. These are the organizations that are capturing irregular value because they're going about business in an irregular manner. So that mindset shift is actually an evolution in terms of how we think about and practice the way in which we do business. You know that old bumper sticker? I saw this a lot growing up in the 70s and early 80s, question authority. You've probably all seen this. Well, I think the authority we most need to question now is the fundamental authority of our own beliefs and our company's own encrusted beliefs around their mission, their operating model, the assumptions they make about who their customer is. All of those things are nothing more than hypotheses that should be forever open to disconfirmation. The future, I think, has a way of making monkeys out of individuals who cling too tightly to their certainties. We are evolving as a society and as the sector of commerce at an ever faster rate. So we say, things are changing all the time. Yeah, that's true. The delta of change is also accelerating. So change is changing faster than ever before. So if we think of ourselves as incumbents in a world full of well-funded insurgents, our cerebral sclerosis is going to be deadly. So on that note, thank you for your attention. Thanks for sticking with me this morning.